Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Harass Me, Treat Me Like Crap. That's going to cost you 5 years' salary. First, some background. A bit over 6 months prior to the start of this story, we had a change up at the company I worked for. The old owner was a great guy that was retiring and handing the company off to his son, a real POS just out of business school type. The son, with the mentality that the company is now his, went about restructuring, namely reassigning teams to different projects, and leaving those that remained in their old positions to pick up double, if not triple, the workload. He did this all in the name of saving a little money. Unfortunately, my department, Safety Engineering, of which I was the team lead, was not spared from this effort. In the end, I had it out with the boss and department head, ultimately costing the company 3 months of my entire department working 80+ hour weeks, and forcing a huge year-end bonus to be paid out to us. Unfortunately, after my initial meeting with the new boss, i.e. the son, he took a liking to me, in a really bad way. Essentially, he really liked me, and wanted to go out with me, or sleep with me, or however you want to put it. He even enlisted his friends and secretaries to help him. It went on for months, just blatant sexual harassment. They even made comments about me losing my late husband and that I should just get back on the horse, so to speak. I kept everything, every email, every voicemail, and went to my best friend who happens to be a really good lawyer, a contract lawyer, to be exact, so not exactly their area of expertise, but they knew enough to help. This friend drafted a letter to the boss, essentially a "stop or we're going to start a big case over this kind of thing," and everything stopped. However, I was then moved from working in office to a work from home arrangement. I knew what was coming. They were going to do their best to get rid of me, so I started documenting everything. But as luck would happen, I received an email chain from the bosses. A good friend of mine in the office who was in the email chain added me to the CC list. And wouldn't you know, it was back and forth communication of them discussing how they would get rid of me and pin the blame on me. The email chain was just disgusting. They hated me so badly and wanted me gone, but because of my contract they would have to buy me out. But being the cheapskates they are, they wanted me gone for free, so the company bosses started a campaign to try and torment me. They first tried to say that because now I work from home they were required to install cameras in my home office to make sure I was being productive. Luckily that did not work. You have to love contracts. They also tried assigning an impossible workload to me, but luckily my team and I were almost like family and they picked up the slack. After 3 months of this crap, I get an email and a phone call from the HR department saying I was getting laid off indefinitely because there was just no work for me. This was complete BS given that we had several dozen projects we were working on. On a side note, in Ontario there is no such thing as a layoff, as, in the court's eyes, being laid off is considered an active dismissal, which is essentially the same as being fired. After this conversation with HR, I call my lawyer friend, almost in tears, just shouting, "Look what they are doing to me. Help." She calms me down and tells me, "This is such a good thing, we have so much evidence against them." I had already forwarded and printed everything off that was sent to me, and it was lucky I did because a scant few hours after I was laid off my computer was remotely wiped clean, everything was gone, leaving just a blank desktop. When I called the HR department to get copies of all my filed complaints, what do you know, everything was gone. In their place was a bunch of BS reprimands that never happened, that I never signed or saw, dating months and months back, and all signed by the new boss, despite the fact that they were dated before he ever took control of the company. It was clear they were total BS, but I got copies of everything to add to my stack of records. I texted all my old colleagues to let them know what was happening, and that I am basically gone. Like I said earlier, we were like family, and with me on the way out they started looking for better employment. Not only that, but they contacted all their friends who worked for the company to do the same. I was laid off on a Monday, and on Thursday I walked into the office with my employment lawyer. I swear, the main secretary was on the phone to security the second she saw me walk in, and they were at the door in a matter of a minute. My lawyer simply handed her a legal document, a summons to meet for mediation at his office on the next Friday. During the following week I received so many calls and text messages from the bosses, friends, secretaries, and people I knew in the office to just be friendly with the owner, to just drop it, and that they wanted to bring me back and forget about everything, like hell I was going back to such a hostile work environment. Friday finally comes and into my lawyer's office my former boss walks in with a squad of 4 of his lawyers to settle the matter. And off the bat he offers me 3 months severance to end all of this because I didn't have any evidence to rebut the fake paperwork they had on file. At this point my lawyer starts to bring out all the paperwork we had, namely copies of every complaint I had ever filed which were all signed by the bosses, HR, and myself. Luckily for our case, I had made sure to take a copy of each complaint when it was written up. They didn't think I had anything. Oh boy, were they wrong. My lawyer made the case that in court it'd be obvious that all the paperwork they had on their end were forgeries, nothing was signed by me, and he pointed out that there were dates with the boss signature where he wasn't in the country, let alone working for the company yet. At that point the boss and his lawyers went to speak privately. After about a half an hour they came back with a much better offer, a full year's salary. But my lawyer was like, nah, we'll just go with what the contract says plus go for damages in court. Given the recent changeover at the company, the lawyers seemed to know they couldn't afford this going to court, not to mention it would be so bad for the company's reputation. So they basically rolled over and asked, what do you want? We demanded 5 years' salary plus the average bonus I would have made for each year plus all the legal fees paid. It was a big win. But it didn't end there. I got a taste of blood and wanted more. I made phone calls to several companies where I had contacts and found jobs for every member of my team and several members of other teams. By the end of a week the company lost 10 of its most talented people. Not to mention most of those people had friends and colleagues that ended up following them to their new employers. The fallout was pretty bad. Before all of this they had the pick of the litter when new university students graduated. But now, because they lost almost all of their senior people, they had no one to mentor new employees. Plus word got out fast how they treat workers like crap, so no one with any talent would even think of getting near the company. As of today the company is just a shell of its former self. It's still big, but it bleeds money. They also now have a problem with permanent staffing and are paying out the nose to hire subcontractors. Let's just say they don't make money like they used to. In fact, they have not started any new projects in something like 9 months. If something isn't done on the side of management to improve things fast, they will likely be going bankrupt in the very near future. Next one is titled, Too Lazy to Do Your Jobs? Well then, take care of the boxes. A bit of backstory, this was during my time I was working in retail. Every day, my department would get pallets of merchandise that needed to be stocked, usually after my coworkers and I would leave for the day. Just before closing, I would work closing 1 week, opening shift the following week, weekends off. During that time, we would have several groups of overnight coworkers, assigned to different departments to stock merchandise brought in on the delivery trucks, and then put any overstock in the back, clean up the cardboard boxes. The opening shift would take care of any overstock pallets the overnights didn't have time to get to. Every week, each group of overnight employees would be rotated to different departments. Unfortunately, there was one group of overnight employees that had a bit of a reputation for being lazy, and those guys were assigned to my department for the week. At the time when this happened, I was working my opening shift. Years before COVID, the wrongs being done during the week wasn't so much being done to just me, it was being done to my other co-workers in my entire department, so this was pretty much a group effort. On with the story, my co-workers and I get to our department to find 4 pallets of merchandise, saran wrapped, labeled as overstock. We double-checked the pallets and the shelves and find out that it needed to be worked. We were upset. By that time, the department manager and supervisor found out, and they were absolutely livid. So we ended up working the merchandise, putting them on the shelves. I was getting ready to start breaking down the boxes, when I got this wicked idea. My idea was to stack all of the empty boxes, like they were full, wrap them up, and label them as overstock, but I wanted to get the approval from my supervisor first. When I talked to my supervisor, I mentioned what I wanted to do. My supervisor chuckled at the idea, approved it, and explained what had happened to him last year. Apparently a year before, the overnight employees played a prank on him. On April 1st, they had left 2 pallets of merchandise, wrapped up and labeled as overstock. He said he double-checked, only to find out that all of the boxes on the pallets were empty. He gathered all of us in the department, explained what we were doing, and we got to work. The supervisor explained that if it should happen again, we should inform him, work the merchandise, restock the empty boxes as if they are full, wrap them, label them as overstock, and leave the pallets for the overnighters. Unfortunately, my opening co-workers and I, we're done for the day. We were at 2 pallets. Fortunately, our closing co-workers were there when the supervisor explained what he wanted done. The next day, we walk in, more pallets of overstock merchandise. Supervisor was informed, basically, rinse and repeat for the rest of the week. The last day of the week, however, we walk in. To our surprise, there was only 1 pallet. It had 7 pallets stacked on top of it with a handwritten, "Go duck yourselves" label on it. We informed the supervisor. He informed us that the overnight group assigned to our department were terminated by the store manager. Next one is titled, Karma 3 Times and Revenge. This story is about a man that had karma hit him 3 times in a fairly short period, but after a long period of time. First, he lost all respect from his friends and colleagues. Second, he was fired from a job, and third, a burnt bridge came back to bite him. The revenge fell in my lap like a gift and wasn't something that I set out to do. First, I'll say that I was the frozen food manager in a large supermarket. The man I'll call John took my place after I found another job. After 3 days in the new job, I found out that my new boss had lied to me about the amount of time I would work each day and about the work I would be doing. I went to my old boss at the supermarket and asked if he'd hire me back. He did so without hesitation. I didn't expect that he would put me back in my old position, but he insisted on it. Therefore, John was put back to his old position. This part will come up again later in the story. Throughout the years, John and I had hit it off as friends. We went fishing together. Our families met in Florida one year. We went to each other's places and played cards. Since we lived pretty close to each other, we would ride bikes to work together also. After a time, I was eventually made the grocery department manager. I was third in line of management in the store behind the manager and assistant manager. I don't remember exactly when John and my friendship went off the tracks, but eventually it did. All of a sudden, different people were coming up to me and asking me things I supposedly said. My night stocking crew was the hardest. I couldn't figure out why they were turning so much against me. I've always been an easygoing guy. If anyone had any problems, all they had to do was come up and talk to me about it. Eventually, I figured out it was John. While being a friend to me up front, he was stabbing me in the back. I started working nights once in a while so I could get to know those guys a little better, and for them to know what kind of person I was. That seemed to work for the most part. At some point, John got transferred back to being the frozen foods manager. Most days at lunch he would bring in some type of frozen dinner that sales reps had covered for him. As for me, it was none of my business, although I thought it was weird. I actually saw him switching labels for his wife when she was in the store once, 1980s, before scanners. I didn't turn him in because if I had, he would have at the most received a slap on the hand, then he would have made my life miserable. If I was ever going to turn him in, it would have to be for something he'd get fired. Then, the fateful day arrives. One of our other department managers had seen enough and turned him in for the frozen dinner thing. As I predicted, he got a slap on the hand. He then went around the store telling anyone who listened that I was the one who tattled. The other department manager couldn't stand it, so she confronted him, told him she was the culprit, and she also made sure everyone knew it. He immediately beelined to me and tries saying that he was being misunderstood. I didn't say much, just shrugged it off. This was his introduction to karma. No one in the store trusted or believed him anymore. The manager that turned him in told me that John felt that any promotion I got should have been his from the time I had quit years ago. No, I got promotions because of my ability and the trust the store manager had in me. It wasn't too long after that a new grocery store was opening up in town. John applied for a management position and got it. He spent the next couple weeks trying to recruit other store employees to go over with him. He struck out. In his new job he ended up being third in line of management. I'm not really sure what his position was though. Once there, old habits die hard. He started trying to sabotage the assistant manager. They didn't fall for it though and was fired after a few weeks. That was karma number 2. Karma number 3 was the sweetest to me by far. Now he is without a job and he comes back begging to our store manager for any type of position, even a carry-out, someone who bags groceries for the customer. The revenge? The manager then comes to me, asks my opinion. I told her that we don't need the drama and if it were me, I wouldn't hire him back. She didn't. Now, had John went on his abilities instead of trying to sabotage other people, he could have gone a long way. The company expanded to a few more stores after that, so he would have had a lot of options. I always felt bad about pushing him out of the frozen position all those years ago, but it wasn't my call. I just wish that all those times we were together outside of work, he'd have talked to me about it. Last one is titled, "We Took Her for Ice Cream While Fleeing a Cult." Trigger warning, there are serious topics below, but nothing graphic. It's a sad and long story. This was over a decade ago and I still think about it from time to time. It's one of those situations where you're sort of on the sidelines watching things go down without all the puzzle pieces, then the puzzle reveals itself and you're just stupefied. I had traveled a bunch after high school and moved across the country. My then partner and I had been lucky enough to be accommodated by couch surfing hosts all over the country via a couch surfing website community, so we felt compelled to give back since I had scored myself a room in a popular and expensive city. One couch surfer, gonna call her Grace, asked to stay over a weekend and we happily accommodated her. She ended up staying longer and longer, but we didn't mind because she was really fun and clearly needing support. We were all in our very early 20s and we would go exploring the city and nightly hike up a huge hill to go get ice cream. The ice cream at the shop up the hill was amazing, so much so that Grace couldn't resist even though she was allergic. It gave her intense IBS, I'm not certain if that's an allergy or intolerance. It was basically a super fun slumber party and we bonded over growing up in a similar area and having dreams to change the world. Grace was amazing, so bright and loving, but she was hiding something. She had a huge van, like extended cab and everything, and it was super nice. My partner and I were into van life being travelers, so we were of course curious about it. Grace was very private about the van and I never even got to be in it. All we knew was that it was technically her friend's and that she was going to have to give it back. Grace had been traveling in it for weeks by this point. As Grace grew to trust us, she opened up about how she was fleeing her family. Turns out she was born and raised into a cult. The kind that operates in average American towns where people just likely think the families are super conservative and don't pay them much mind. She had never experienced media before. She didn't know who Britney Spears was, no cartoon history, nothing but the Bible. Luckily she had spent some time in public schools and her curiosity had kept her brain sharp. She was learning Spanish and always trying to stop people in the city to talk with her for practice. Sort of your typical small town Joe brought to the big city, not having any understanding that cities don't operate like that. It was refreshing, though it did get her in some trouble sometimes, as you can imagine. A young, super naive woman happy to chat up anyone at a bus stop and believe whatever strangers told her, that kind of trouble. Nothing too serious, luckily. One day she let us get a peek into the van. It was packed, clothes, boxes, a sleeping bag, and one box filled with dozens of notebooks. Grace told us on the tour, as me and my partner stood outside looking in, that she had been reading through the notebooks on her driving tour across the country. The story was about to unfold. After a while, I'm terrible with memories being in time, so I can't accurately say how long Grace was with us, maybe a few weeks. Grace let us know she had to return the van finally. Turns out the friend of hers was no longer alive. Grace's friend, let's call her Angel, was supposed to go with her on this epic journey across the country and flee the cult together. Angel couldn't hang on long enough and died by suicide just before the trip. Angel had already given Grace the van filled with all of Angel's belongings and the many notebooks. When Grace heard what happened, she instinctually left. Angel and Grace were both in the same cult together, so Grace knew her van wouldn't be safe anywhere near their families. Grace didn't know why Angel wanted to keep the van from their families, but she found out soon after. Angel had highlighted the notebook pages, they were her diary. Angel's family had been beside themselves trying to get the van and its contents back from Grace in the weeks she had been away, but they hadn't called the police about it being stolen. Grace was fending off phone attacks regularly but got them to calm down once she agreed to return it. She let us know she was going to have to leave us soon to return the van, but not the notebooks. Angel had siblings, she couldn't hang on long enough until graduation to get out of the cult herself, but her revenge with the help of her best friend Grace would ensure her siblings would. Angel had highlighted all of the abuse she suffered from her parents and the cult in her diary. Dozens of notebooks filled with the truth and what she had suffered her entire childhood. Grace didn't tell us everything, and I respect that, but it was sexual abuse at the hands of her parents and other cult members, as well as horrific child abuse upon Angel and her siblings. Grace was shocked. She was in the same cult, but luckily had a very different experience. She had no idea what her best friend had been suffering through. Grace didn't let Angel down. She turned over the notebooks to the police before giving the van back. I know at the time Angel's siblings were taken from the parents as we stayed in touch for a while after, but I'm not sure what all legal repercussions there were, as that was a long issue to sort out with the police and courts. Grace was brave enough to leave, without fully understanding, to fulfill a friend's final wishes. She had to endure the pain of the truth spilling out over every highlighted page revealing her best friend's torment, and managed to go through with her friend's revenge from the beyond. To get her siblings to safety and away from abuse the only way a lonely, isolated and brainwashed teen thought she could. Hearing all of those screaming phone calls ordering her to return the van, watching Grace stand strong against a controlling cult, all while we just giggled at our adult slumber parties after eating way too much ice cream every night, not understanding the gravity of the secrets Grace held. Just wow. She did it, she got justice and revenge on the perfect family cult and Angel's despicable parents. Thanks for listening.